The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878, as Bethany Valentine clutched her 4-year-old son Samuel tightly to her chest, shielding his eyes from the grisly scene. Her husband of 5 years lay sprawled in the dirt, blood pooling beneath him, another victim of the lawless frontier. The town undertaker shook his head solemnly as he approached, his weathered face a mask of practiced sympathy that did little to comfort the young widow who now faced an uncertain future in a merciless land. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Valentine," he said, removing his hat. "Best get the boy home." Bethany nodded numbly, her honey-brown hair falling loose from its pins as she turned away from the crowd gathering around her husband's body. Samuel's small hand gripped hers with surprising strength as they walked back to their modest home on the edge of town, his blue eyes so like his father's wide with confusion and fear. "Where's Papa going?" Samuel asked, his bottom lip quivering. "Why isn't he coming with us?" The words stuck in Bethany's throat as she fumbled with the key to their front door. How could she explain death to a child who had barely begun to understand life? Her hands trembled as she finally pushed the door open, ushering Samuel inside. "Your papa," she began, kneeling to meet his gaze. "He's gone to heaven, sweetheart. He won't be coming home." Samuel's face crumpled. "But who's going to teach me to ride? Who's going to be my papa now?" His small voice broke as tears spilled down his cheeks. Bethany pulled him close, her own tears mingling with his as she whispered, "I don't know, my love. I don't know." That night, after Samuel had finally cried himself to sleep, Bethany sat alone at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. The meager savings hidden in the old coffee tin wouldn't last more than a month. Her husband Thomas had worked as a clerk at the general store, his modest salary barely enough to keep them comfortable. Now, with winter approaching and food prices rising, she faced impossible choices. She could return east to her parents, admit defeat after they had warned her against marrying Thomas and moving to this godless territory. But the thought of their condescending pity was almost worse than poverty. Besides, the train ticket alone would consume most of their savings. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Cautiously, she picked up Thomas's old revolver from the drawer and approached the entrance. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's me from next door," came the reply. "I've brought some supper for you and the boy." Bethany opened the door to find her neighbor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, holding a covered dish that smelled of chicken and dumplings. "I figured you wouldn't feel much like cooking tonight," Mee said, pressing the warm dish into Bethany's hands. "How's the little one?" "Asleep, finally," Bethany replied, stepping back to let me enter. "I don't think he understands, not really." Mee nodded sympathetically as she settled at the table. "Children are resilient, but they need stability." "What will you do now?" Bethany set the dish down and sank into a chair. "I don't know. I can sew, but there are already 2 seamstresses in town. I could try for work at the hotel or the saloon." "Not the saloon," Mee interrupted firmly. "A respectable widow doesn't work serving drinks to cowboys and miners. The hotel might be an option, though Mrs. Hoffman is particular about who she hires." They talked late into the night, weighing options that grew increasingly desperate. By the time Mee left, Bethany had resolved to speak with Mrs. Hoffman about laundry work at the hotel, though the thought of spending days scrubbing linens while Samuel was left with neighbors made her heart ache. The following week passed in a blur of grief and practical concerns. The funeral was a simple affair, attended by a handful of townspeople who had known Thomas. Bethany secured work at the hotel, though the pay was less than she'd hoped. "Samuel spent his days with me, returning each evening with questions Bethany couldn't answer. "Jimmy at the store has a papa," he said one night as she tucked him into bed. "And so does Billy across the street. Why don't I have one anymore?" "Because sometimes sad things happen," Bethany replied, smoothing his hair. "But you have me, and I love you enough for two parents." Samuel's lower lip trembled. "But it's not the same. I want a papa who can teach me to shoot and ride horses and build things." Each night, the conversation repeated with slight variations, and each night, Bethany's heart broke anew. The laundry work left her hands raw and her back aching, but it was the emotional toll of Samuel's growing sadness that weighed heaviest. One morning in early November, as frost dusted the ground and Bethany's breath misted in the cold dawn air as she walked to work, she heard commotion at the livery stable. A group of cowboys had arrived, trail-worn and rowdy, leading a herd of cattle to the stockyards north of town. They were a common sight in Redemption Creek, men who drove cattle across the territory, working for large ranches or independent operators, staying a few days before moving on. Bethany gave them a wide berth, hurrying past with her shawl pulled tight. She'd heard enough stories about drunken cowboys to be wary, though these men seemed focused on their horses and cattle rather than causing trouble. Later that day, as she hung sheets to dry behind the hotel, she caught sight of one of the cowboys. He stood apart from the others, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his hat. Unlike his companions who had headed straight for the saloon after securing their herd, this man was at the general store, purchasing supplies. Something about his solitary figure caught her attention, though she quickly returned to her work when he glanced in her direction. That evening, Bethany walked wearily to Mee's house to collect Samuel. The November wind cut through her thin coat as she knocked on the door, dreading another night of difficult questions from her son. "Mama," Samuel cried as the door opened, launching himself into her arms with unexpected enthusiasm. "I met a real cowboy today. He was in Miss Mee's yard fixing her fence, and he let me hold his hat." Bethany looked questioningly at me, who smiled. "One of those cattle drivers noticed my broken fence when he was passing by, offered to fix it for the price of a home-cooked meal. Seems a decent sort, quiet, polite. Said his name is Zachary Jackson, works for the Rockingham Ranch up near Flagstaff. He has a real gun, Mama," Samuel continued excitedly, "and he promised to show me his horse tomorrow if you say it's all right." Bethany frowned. "Samuel, we don't know this man. And the cowboys will be moving on soon anyway." "Actually," Mee interjected, "he mentioned they'll be in town about a week. The cattle buyer is delayed, and they need to rest the herd before the final drive to the railroad." Samuel looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Please, Mama. He tells good stories about Indians and buffalo and wild horses." Bethany sighed, unable to deny her son this small happiness after weeks of sorrow. "We'll see. Now thank Miss Me and let's get home for supper." As they walked home, Samuel chattered excitedly about the cowboy's adventures, more animated than he'd been since his father's death. Bethany listened with mixed feelings, grateful for her son's improved spirits, but wary of him growing attached to a man who would soon disappear from their lives. The next morning, Samuel woke before dawn, eager to visit Mee's house in hopes of seeing the cowboy again. Bethany, exhausted from another night of poor sleep, reluctantly agreed to take him to Mee's earlier than usual. "Now remember," she cautioned as they approached Mee's cottage, "Mr. Jackson is working, not here to entertain little boys. You must be polite and not pester him with too many questions." Samuel nodded solemnly, though his eyes gleamed with excitement. As they rounded the corner to Mee's house, they saw the tall figure of Zachary Jackson already at work, replacing rotted boards in Mee's porch steps. Mr. Zach, Samuel called, breaking free of Bethany's grasp and running toward the man. The cowboy straightened, a smile breaking across his tanned face. He was younger than Bethany had expected, perhaps 30, with striking features partially hidden beneath several days' growth of beard. His eyes, a deep green that reminded her of the pine forests in the mountains, crinkled at the corners as he greeted Samuel. "Well, good morning, young man," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "You're up with the chickens today." "Mama said I could come see your horse if you weren't too busy," Samuel explained, bouncing on his toes. "Are you too busy?" Zachary glanced up at Bethany, who had approached more slowly. He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a slight wave to it. "Madam," he greeted her respectfully. "Zachary Jackson. Your boy here made fine company yesterday while I was working." "Bethany Valentine," she replied stiffly. "And this is Samuel. I apologize if he's bothering you." "No bother at all," Zachary assured her. "I've got a nephew about his age back in Texas." "Miss Children's company on the trail." He turned to Samuel. "I reckon I could introduce you to Diablo after I finish these steps for Miss Me. That all right with your mama?" Samuel looked at Bethany with such naked hope that she felt her resistance melting. "I suppose that would be fine if you're sure we're not imposing. Samuel needs to be at Miss Me's by 8, and I need to get to my work at the hotel." "No imposition," Zachary replied, hammering a nail with easy efficiency. "Almost done here anyhow." Me appeared at her door, smiling broadly. "Bethany, come in for some coffee while Mr. Jackson finishes up. I've got fresh biscuits, too." Reluctantly, Bethany allowed herself to be ushered inside, though she positioned herself at the window where she could keep an eye on Samuel, who was now earnestly holding nails for the cowboy. "He's good with the boy," Me observed, pouring coffee into a chipped cup, "and Samuel's taken quite a shine to him." "He'll be moving on in a week," Bethany reminded her, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I don't want Samuel getting attached." Me nodded sympathetically. "Of course. Still, it does the boy good to have a man to look up to, even temporarily. Mr. Jackson asked about you yesterday, you know." Bethany nearly choked on her coffee. "Asked what? About you and Samuel. I told him you were recently widowed. Hope you don't mind." He seemed genuinely concerned, not just prying. Before Bethany could respond, Samuel burst through the door, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mama! Mr. Zach says we can go see Diablo now. He's at the livery stable." Bethany checked the small watch pinned to her dress. "I need to be at work soon, Samuel. The livery's on your way to the hotel," Me pointed out. "And I'm sure Mr. Jackson will bring Samuel back here after." Seeing no graceful way to refuse, Bethany nodded. "All right, but a quick visit only. Put your coat back on, Samuel." Outside, Zachary had cleaned his tools and was waiting patiently, hat in hand. Up close, Bethany noticed a thin scar that ran along his jawline and the way his eyes seemed to take in everything around them, alert yet calm. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to facing danger, yet there was nothing threatening in his demeanor. "Much obliged for allowing me to show Samuel my horse," he said as they began walking toward the livery. "Boy's got a natural curiosity about ranching life." "His father wanted to teach him to ride," Bethany found herself saying. "He never got the chance." Zachary's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Miss Me mentioned it was recent." "3 weeks ago," Bethany replied, surprised by her own candor. "Shot during a robbery at the bank. He was just depositing his pay." "The territory can be a harsh place," Zachary said quietly, "especially for those left behind." Something in his tone suggested personal knowledge of loss, but before Bethany could respond, they reached the livery stable where a magnificent black stallion stood in one of the front stalls. "There he is," Zachary announced. Diablo. Best cow horse in 3 territories, though don't tell him that or his head won't fit through the stable door. Samuel gasped in awe at the horse, who nickered softly as Zachary approached. He's so big, can I touch him? Let's do better than that, Zachary suggested, opening the stall door. With practiced ease, he lifted Samuel onto his shoulder, bringing the boy to eye level with the horse. Hold your hand out flat like this, he demonstrated, and let him smell you first. Bethany watched nervously as Samuel followed the instructions, giggling when the horse's soft muzzle tickled his palm. Zachary's strong hands held her son securely, and the way he patiently explained each aspect of the horse's care showed a natural teaching ability that reminded her painfully of what Samuel had lost. I can ride him someday, Samuel asked hopefully. Well, Diablo here might be a bit much for a beginner, Zachary laughed. But there's a gentle mare at the ranch where I work that would be perfect for learning. My boss raises some of the finest quarter horses in the territory. The comment reminded Bethany that this man was just passing through a kindness to be appreciated but not counted upon. We should let Mr. Jackson get back to his work, Samuel, and I need to get to mine. Reluctantly, Samuel said goodbye to the horse, his small hand lingering on the stallion's neck. As Zachary set him down, the boy looked up with transparent admiration. Will you come back tomorrow? Maybe you could teach me to lasso like a real cowboy. Before Bethany could intervene, Zachary squatted to Samuel's level. I'd be honored if your mama agrees. I'm helping Miss Me with some more repairs tomorrow morning. Both man and boy looked to Bethany, whose resolve weakened under their combined gazes. Perhaps for a little while, she conceded. Samuel, say thank you to Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Zach. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and even Bethany found herself smiling as they parted ways outside the livery. Madam, Zachary tipped his hat to her. It was a pleasure meeting you properly. Perhaps I'll see you tomorrow. As she watched him walk away, Bethany felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that she quickly suppressed. Handsome cowboys with kind smiles and gentle ways with children were not part of her future. Her focus needed to remain on survival, on creating stability for Samuel in a world that had already taken too much from him. Yet that night, as Samuel prattled excitedly about horses and lassos over their simple supper of beans and cornbread, Bethany found herself thinking of green eyes and a voice that carried the warm tones of distant Texas. The next several days fell into an unexpected pattern. Each morning, Bethany would take Samuel to Me's, where Zachary would invariably be working on some repair: the sagging porch roof, the leaky water pump, the broken chicken coop. He always had a few minutes to show Samuel something new: how to tie a special knot, identify animal tracks, or recognize the different birds that called Arizona home. Bethany found herself lingering longer each morning, first out of caution, then increasingly from a desire to watch the easy interaction between the cowboy and her son. Zachary never overstepped, always seeking her approval before teaching Samuel anything new, and he spoke to the boy not as a child but as a person worthy of respect. On the 4th day, as Zachary demonstrated how to safely whittle wood with a small knife, Bethany noticed how his strong, calloused hands moved with surprising gentleness. When he caught her watching, he smiled, not the cocky grin she'd seen other cowboys flash at women, but something warmer, more genuine. "Your boy's a quick study," he commented as Samuel concentrated on his piece of wood, tongue sticking out between his teeth. "Sharp mind." "Like his father," Bethany replied, the words coming easier now. "Thomas was always reading, learning. He wanted Samuel to go to university someday." "A fine ambition," Zachary nodded. "Though out here, a boy needs practical skills too, Book learning and life learning, my pa used to call it. And which did you favor, Mr. Jackson? Bethany found herself asking. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Both, when possible. 3 years at a college in Virginia before my family lost everything in the war. Then life became the teacher. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. And please call me Zach. Mr. Jackson makes me look around for my father. Before she could respond, Samuel held up his whittling attempt, a roughly shaped horse. Look, Mama, I made Diablo. It's wonderful, sweetheart, Bethany exclaimed, genuinely impressed by the recognizable form. He's got an artist's eye, Zach observed. Noticed the details of Diablo's blaze and got it just right. Samuel beamed under the praise, and Bethany felt a surge of gratitude toward this man, who seemed to instinctively understand what her son needed. Yet beneath the gratitude lay anxiety. In just a few days, Zach and his fellow cowboys would drive their cattle to the railroad and disappear from their lives, leaving Samuel to face another loss. That evening at supper, Samuel grew unusually quiet, pushing his food around his plate instead of eating. Bethany watched him with concern, wondering if he was coming down with something. "What's troubling you, sweetheart?" she finally asked. "Aren't you hungry?" Samuel looked up, his blue eyes serious. "Mama, could Mr. Zach be my new papa?" The question hit Bethany like a physical blow, stealing her breath. "Samuel, that's not. Mr. Jackson is just passing through town. He has a job, a life elsewhere. But he likes us," Samuel persisted. "And I heard Miss Me tell Mrs. Cooper that he looks at you like Pa used to." Heat flashed across Bethany's face. "Miss Me shouldn't be gossiping," she said more sharply than intended, then softened her tone at Samuel's crestfallen expression. "Sweetheart, Mr. Jackson has been very kind, but he'll be leaving soon. We can't expect him to stay because of us." "But what if he wanted to?" Samuel's voice trembled. "I prayed really hard for a new papa and then he came. Maybe God sent him." Bethany's heart constricted. How could she explain the realities of life to a child who still believed in the power of prayer and happy endings? "I think it's a bit more complicated than that," she said gently. "Now finish your supper, please." Later, after tucking a finally sleeping Samuel into bed, Bethany sat on their small porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the November chill. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the quiet town. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of a harmonica, its melancholy tune fitting her mood. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the approaching figure until his shadow fell across the porch steps. "Evening, Mrs. Valentine." Zach's familiar voice startled her. "I hope I'm not intruding." Bethany straightened, pulling her shawl tighter. "Mr. Jackson, is something wrong?" "No, madam," he replied, removing his hat. "I was just walking back from checking on the herd, saw you sitting alone and thought." He hesitated. "Well, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what I thought, except that I wanted to speak with you without little ears listening." Despite her better judgment, Bethany gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Would you like to sit?" Zach settled into the chair with that easy grace she'd come to notice. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the distant harmonica. "That'll be Hank Miller," Zach said eventually. "He plays every night, says it keeps the cattle calm. Personally, I think he just misses his wife back in Kansas." "How long have you been driving cattle?" Bethany asked, genuinely curious about this man who had so captivated her son. "About 8 years now," he replied. "Started as a regular hand, worked my way up to trail boss on some drives. This one's smaller, just helping out the rocking M while their regular trail boss recovers from a broken leg. And when this drive is done," Zach looked out at the moonlit landscape, "that's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually." The owner of the Rockingham, Michael Mercer, is looking to expand operations. He's offered me a permanent position as his foreman, less time on the trail, more managing the ranch itself. He turned to face her directly. The ranch is about 30 miles north of here. Close enough to visit town regularly. Bethany's heart quickened. "Why are you telling me this, Mr. Jackson?" "Zach," he corrected gently. "And I'm telling you because in the past 5 days I've come to care about you and Samuel, more than I expected, more than might be proper to admit." "You hardly know us," Bethany protested weakly, even as something warm unfurled in her chest. "I know that Samuel is bright and curious and brave," Zach replied without hesitation. "I know that you work until your hands are raw to provide for him. I know that despite your loss, you haven't become bitter or given up. And I know that I find myself thinking about both of you at odd moments throughout the day." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. "I'm not proposing anything improper, Mrs. Valentine, just the possibility of continuing our acquaintance once the cattle drive is complete." Bethany stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity or ulterior motive. She found none, only an open honesty that both reassured and terrified her. "Why?" she finally asked. "There are plenty of unmarried women in this territory who don't come with the complication of a young child and a heart full of grief." Zach's expression softened. "Perhaps that's true, but they're not you." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I don't expect an answer tonight. I just wanted you to know that my interest in you and Samuel isn't temporary, like my stay in town." As he stepped off the porch, Bethany found her voice again. "The cattle buyer arrives tomorrow, doesn't he?" Zach nodded. "If all goes well, we'll complete the sale by noon. Plan to leave the following morning. Samuel would like to say a proper goodbye," she said, surprising herself with the words. "Perhaps you could come for supper tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, but—" A smile broke across his face, transforming his features. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Valentine." "Bethany," she corrected softly. "If I'm to call you Zach." "Bethany," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "Until tomorrow, then." She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually blending with the shadows until he disappeared around a corner. Only then did she release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What was she doing? Inviting a man she barely knew to supper, allowing Samuel to grow attached, contemplating possibilities that had seemed unthinkable just a week ago. Yet beneath her caution lay something she had thought lost forever: hope, and the faintest stirring of feelings she had buried alongside her husband. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Bethany negotiated with Mrs. Hoffman for an earlier end to her shift, then spent precious coins at the general store for a piece of beef and fresh vegetables. Mee contributed a sweet potato pie, her eyes twinkling as she helped Bethany prepare for the evening. "He's a good man," Mee said as they peeled potatoes at Bethany's small kitchen table. "I've been watching him all week. Doesn't drink to excess, doesn't swear around the boy, works hard without complaint." "I barely know him," Bethany protested. Mee patted her hand. "Sometimes you know enough. My Harold and I courted for just 2 weeks before we married. 43 years together before he passed, and never a day's regret." Samuel was beside himself with excitement when Bethany told him about the dinner guest, insisting on wearing his best shirt and helping to set the table. As the appointed hour approached, he positioned himself by the window, watching for Zach's arrival. "He's coming," Samuel announced finally, bouncing on his toes. "And he's carrying something." Bethany smoothed her hair, suddenly self-conscious in her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that Thomas had always said matched her eyes. She had spent precious minutes pinning her honey-brown hair into a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun, and me had insisted she wear a dab of rose water behind her ears. "Remember your manners," she reminded Samuel as a knock sounded at the door. "No talking with your mouth full, and don't pester Mr. Jackson with too many questions at once." Samuel nodded solemnly, though his eyes danced with excitement as Bethany opened the door. Zach stood on the threshold, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt beneath his vest. His hat was in one hand, and in the other he held a small wooden object wrapped in brown paper. "Evening, Bethany," he greeted her, his green eyes warm. "Samuel, something smells mighty fine." "We're having roast beef," Samuel informed him, practically vibrating with excitement. "And potatoes and carrots, and Miss Me made pie. Sounds like a feast," Zach replied seriously. "And it happens I brought something for the occasion." He handed the wrapped object to Samuel. "Something I've been working on during evenings at camp." Samuel tore open the paper to reveal a beautifully carved wooden horse, its details far more refined than his own attempt at whittling. "Diablo!" he exclaimed, running his fingers over the smooth surface. "Mama, look, it's perfect." "It's beautiful," Bethany agreed, genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. "You're very talented, Zach." A hint of color touched his tanned cheeks. "My grandfather taught me, said idle hands lead to trouble, so cowboys better keep busy even when they're resting. Can I show it to my soldiers?" Samuel asked, already heading toward his room. "Wash your hands first," Bethany called after him. "Supper's nearly ready." Alone with Zach for the first time, she felt suddenly shy. "Thank you for coming, and for the gift. Samuel will treasure it." "It was my pleasure," he replied, his gaze steady on hers. "I've been looking forward to this all day." The simple honesty in his voice broke through some of her nervousness. "Well, I hope you won't be disappointed. I'm not the cook, Me is." "After months of trail food, anything home cooked is a banquet," he assured her. "May I help with anything?" The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Samuel dominated the conversation initially, peppering Zach with questions about ranch life and horses. Zach answered each one patiently, occasionally catching Bethany's eye with a smile that seemed meant just for her. As Samuel began to wind down with the meal, Zach turned the conversation toward Bethany. "Me mentioned you're from back east originally, Philadelphia," she nodded. "My father is a professor at the university there. They wanted me to marry a colleague's son, a sensible match, they said. Then I met Thomas at a lecture on Western expansion, and sensibility seemed less important than love. The West has a way of calling to certain souls," Zach agreed. "My family had a small ranch in Texas, but after the war there wasn't much left. I headed west looking for something new, maybe something of my own someday. The foreman position at the Rocking M would be a step toward that, a significant one," he confirmed. "Mr. Mercer is getting on in years, has no son to take over. His daughter's married to a banker in San Francisco with no interest in ranching. In time, there might be opportunities for more responsibility, maybe even partnership." As the evening progressed and Samuel began to droop with sleepiness, Bethany excused herself to put him to bed. The boy insisted on Zach coming to say good night, a request he granted with evident pleasure. "Will you come back tomorrow before you leave?" Samuel asked as Bethany tucked the blankets around him. Zach glanced at Bethany before answering. "If your mama says it's all right, I'd like to say a proper goodbye." "You can come back after that too, can't you?" Samuel pressed, struggling against sleep. "From your ranch." "Samuel," Bethany began, but Zach touched her arm gently. "I'd like that very much, Samuel," he said seriously. "With your mama's permission, of course." This seemed to satisfy the boy, who finally surrendered to sleep, the wooden horse clutched in his small hand. Bethany and Zach tiptoed from the room, closing the door quietly behind them. In the main room, An awkward silence descended. The evening was drawing to its natural conclusion, yet Bethany found herself reluctant to see it end. "Would you like coffee?" she offered. "There's still some warm on the stove." "That would be nice," Zach replied, seeming equally unwilling to leave. They settled at the table again, the lamplight casting a warm glow over their faces. Bethany found herself studying him openly now, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun, the strong hands that could craft something as delicate as the wooden horse. "You're good with him," she said finally. "Samuel, I mean. You have a way of making him feel important, heard." "He is important," Zach replied simply. "And he's had enough loss in his young life. Children need to know they matter, especially when the world's turned upside down on them." Something in his tone made Bethany curious. "You sound as if you speak from experience." Zach's expression grew distant. "My mother died when I was 8. Influenza. Father never really recovered, threw himself into work, had little time for a grieving boy. My grandfather stepped in, became the steady presence I needed." He met her eyes. "I know what it's like to feel adrift, to need an anchor." The raw honesty of his words touched something deep inside her. "I worry about that with Samuel. That I'm not enough, that he needs more than I can give him alone." "You're a remarkable mother, Bethany," Zach said quietly. "Anyone can see how much you love him, how hard you work to provide for him. But no one can be everything to another person, not even a parent to a child. We all need different connections." "Is that what you're offering? A connection for Samuel?" "For both of you," he replied, his voice deepening slightly. "If you'll allow it." Bethany looked down at her coffee cup, gathering courage for the question that had been on her mind all evening. "Zach, why us? Why not find a younger woman, one without the complications I bring? Someone at the beginning of life, not trying to rebuild from ruins." He was quiet for so long that she feared she had offended him. When she finally raised her eyes, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because ruins can be the foundation for something stronger than what stood before," he said. "Because I've met plenty of young women with untouched hearts and found myself unmoved. Because when I see you with Samuel, I glimpse the kind of family I've wanted to build." He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of hers. "I'm not asking for promises tonight, Bethany, just the chance to return to see where this might lead." The sincerity in his eyes undid her. Slowly, deliberately, she moved her hand the remaining distance, allowing her fingers to touch his. The contact sent warmth flooding through her, awakening feelings she had thought buried with Thomas. "I think I would like that," she whispered. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. They sat together in companionable silence until the clock chimed 10, reminding them of the late hour and tomorrow's responsibilities. At the door, Zach paused, hat in hand. "What time do you head to work tomorrow?" "I'd like to say goodbye to both of you before we leave." "I start at 9, Bethany replied. "We usually leave home around 8:30. "I'll be here at 8 then, if that's acceptable," she nodded, suddenly shy again. "Safe travels tomorrow if I don't get another chance to say it." "Thank you for tonight," he said softly. "For welcoming me into your home, for the best meal I've had in months, for trusting me with Samuel." He hesitated, then leaned forward slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished. When she remained still, he placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Bethany." "Good night, Zach," she whispered, watching as he stepped off the porch and into the moonlit night. Long after he had disappeared from view, she stood in the doorway, her fingers touching the spot where his lips had been, her heart beating a rhythm that felt both terrifying and exhilarating in its unfamiliarity. True to his word, Zach appeared at her door promptly at 8 the next morning. Samuel rushed to greet him, wooden horse in hand, while Bethany finished preparing a simple breakfast. "I thought you might like some coffee and biscuits before your journey," she explained, gesturing to the table. "That's mighty kind," Zach replied, settling into what had already become his chair in her mind. "The boys are finishing up the paperwork with the cattle buyer now. We'll head out around 10. They shared a surprisingly comfortable breakfast, Samuel dominating the conversation with questions about the cattle drive and when exactly Zach would return to visit them. "It'll take us about 3 days to get back to the ranch," Zach explained. "Then I need to get settled into my new position, learn the full scope of my responsibilities." He glanced at Bethany. "But I thought perhaps I might ride down next Saturday if that wouldn't be imposing." "A whole week?" Samuel's face fell dramatically. "It'll pass before you know it," Zach assured him. "And I was thinking, if your mama agrees, maybe next time I visit I could bring a gentle pony for you to start learning to ride." Samuel's eyes widened to saucers as he turned to Bethany. "Can he, Mama, please?" Bethany shot Zach a look that was half exasperation, half amusement. "We'll discuss it," she told her son, then added to Zach, "You shouldn't make promises you might not be able to keep." "I don't," he replied simply, holding her gaze until she looked away, flustered by the intensity she found there, all too soon. It was time for Bethany and Samuel to leave for their respective destinations. Zach walked them as far as Mee's house, where Samuel would spend the morning. "You be good for Miss Mee," Zach instructed the boy seriously. "Mind your manners and help her like you've been doing." "I will," Samuel promised, "and I'll practice my whittling so I can show you when you come back." "I'll look forward to that," Zach replied, squatting to the boy's level. "In the meantime, remember what I showed you about tying those knots. A cowboy needs to know his ropes." Samuel threw his arms around Zach's neck in an impulsive hug. "I'll remember everything." Something flickered across Zach's face, surprise, followed by a softening that made Bethany's heart twist. He returned the hug carefully, as if Samuel were made of glass, then set him back with a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Go on in now and say good morning to Miss Mee." As Samuel disappeared into the house, Zach turned to Bethany. "He's a fine boy, you should be proud." "I am," she replied, suddenly fighting tears. "Thank you for being so kind to him, for the time you've given him this week." "It's been my pleasure," Zach said, his voice low. "And I meant what I said about returning. I'd like to continue getting to know both of you if you'll permit it." Bethany nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The week had brought such unexpected change to their quiet lives, opening possibilities she had believed forever closed to her. "May I write to you?" Zach asked. "It would ease the weeks passing to have some communication." "I'd like that," Bethany managed, surprised by how much she meant it. They stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Zach reached for her hand, raising it slowly to his lips in a gesture that belonged to a more courtly era. "Until Saturday, then," he said, his breath warm against her skin. "Until Saturday," she echoed, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "Safe travels, Zach." She watched him walk away, his tall figure straight and sure, until he turned the corner toward the livery. Only then did she continue to the hotel, her thoughts in a whirl, her hand still tingling from his touch. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zach's promised letter arrived on Wednesday, carried by a ranch hand heading into town for supplies. The careful penmanship surprised her, another reminder not to judge by appearances or occupation. He wrote of his journey back to the ranch, of the responsibilities Mr. Mercer was entrusting to him, and of how thoughts of Bethany and Samuel had kept him company on the trail. Samuel insisted on dictating a reply, which Bethany dutifully wrote out, adding her own brief message at the end. The ranch hand promised to deliver it on his return journey, giving her a knowing look that made her blush. By Saturday morning, Samuel was nearly unbearable with excitement, waking before dawn and asking every few minutes if it was time for Zach to arrive. Bethany, who had spent an extra hour on her appearance and changed her dress twice, understood his impatience all too well. When a knock finally came at 10 o'clock, Samuel reached the door before Bethany could even rise from her chair. Zach stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking remarkably well-groomed for a man who had just ridden 30 miles. Beside him, to Samuel's absolute delight, stood a small pinto pony with a gentle eye. "You brought him," Samuel exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "Just like you promised." "Samuel," Bethany began, but Zach cut in smoothly. "I brought him for a visit," he clarified, giving Bethany a reassuring look. "He belongs to the ranch, but Mr. Mercer agreed he could come for the day so Samuel could meet him. No commitment required." Bethany relaxed slightly, though she still gave him a look that promised further discussion. "That was thoughtful of Mr. Mercer. He's a good man," Zach replied. "Understood completely when I explained about Samuel." His eyes met hers over the boy's head. "And about you." Heat rose in Bethany's cheeks, but before she could respond, Samuel was tugging at Zach's hand. "Can we ride him now, please?" "Whoa there, cowboy," Zach laughed. "First rule of horsemanship, always greet your mount properly. Get to know him before you climb aboard." He guided Samuel toward the pony. "This fellow's name is Patches. He's been teaching children to ride for years, so he knows his job better than I do." Bethany watched as Zach patiently showed Samuel how to approach the pony, how to offer his hand for the animal to sniff, how to stroke its neck in greeting. Her son's face was alight with joy as he followed each instruction carefully. "He's got a natural way with animals," Zach observed as Samuel continued bonding with Patches. "Some folks just do. It can't be taught." "His father was the same," Bethany replied. "Thomas could charm any stray dog or skittish cat. I used to tease him that he'd bring home every homeless creature in Philadelphia if I let him." Zach's expression grew thoughtful. "You loved him very much." It wasn't a question, but Bethany answered anyway. "Yes. We were young and perhaps foolish to come west with so few resources, but we were happy." "I wouldn't presume to replace him," Zach said quietly. "Not in your heart or in Samuel's memory." The simple statement touched her deeply. "I know," she replied. "That's part of why I trust you with him." "With us?" Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Samuel's excited voice broke the spell. "Mama, Mr. Zach says if you say yes, we can take Patches to that flat area behind Miss Mee's house and I can have my first riding lesson." Bethany laughed, the tension of the moment dissolving. "I suppose that would be all right as long as you listen to every instruction Mr. Jackson gives you." "Every single one," Samuel promised solemnly. "Cross my heart." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Zach proved to be as patient a teacher with Samuel as he had been with everything else, guiding the boy through the basics of riding with firm but gentle instruction. Bethany watched from the sidelines, her heart full at the sight of her son's happiness. By noon, Samuel was able to guide Patches in a small circle on his own, though Zach kept a lead rope attached for safety. The boy's face glowed with pride as he demonstrated his new skills for Bethany. "Look, Mama, I'm riding by myself." "You certainly are," she agreed, clapping her hands. "What a fine horseman you're becoming." After the lesson, they returned to Bethany's home for the lunch she had prepared. Samuel chattered excitedly throughout the meal, barely stopping to eat as he recounted every moment of his riding experience. "And next time, Mr. Zach says maybe I can learn to trot. That's faster than walking," he explained importantly. And after that comes cantering and then galloping. One step at a time, Zach reminded him with a smile. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes on horseback can lead to falls. As the afternoon wore on, Samuel's energy finally began to flag. After helping Zach brush down patches and ensure the pony had water, the boy curled up in a chair on the porch, ostensibly to watch the street, but soon drifting into sleep. "He's worn himself out," Bethany observed, covering him with a light blanket. "Too excited to nap earlier, but nature always wins in the end." She and Zach sat on the porch steps, enjoying the mild November afternoon. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by distant town sounds and Samuel's soft breathing. "Thank you for today," Bethany said finally. "For the pony, the lesson. I haven't seen him this happy since." She trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. "It was my pleasure," Zach replied. "Truthfully, I enjoyed it as much as he did." He hesitated, then added, "My father never had time to teach me to ride. My grandfather did that. I remember how it felt to have someone take an interest, show me something new." "You're good with him," Bethany said softly. "You have a natural way with children." "Just this one," Zach corrected, his voice equally quiet. "And his mother." The simple statement hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Bethany felt her heart quicken as Zach shifted slightly closer on the step. "Bethany," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I know it's only been 2 weeks since we met. I know you're still grieving, still finding your way forward, but I find myself thinking about you and Samuel constantly. About the possibility of a life that includes both of you." "Zach," she whispered, both terrified and exhilarated by the direction of his words. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he assured her quickly. "Just the chance to continue visiting, to get to know each other better, to see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you might be feeling too, could grow into something lasting." Bethany looked at his face, open and earnest in the afternoon light. 2 weeks ago, she would have dismissed such talk as madness or desperation. But something had shifted in her world since meeting Zachary Jackson. Where there had been only grief and worry, now there was also possibility, a tentative hope for something she had believed lost forever. "I'd like that," she said simply, "to see where this leads." The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine after rain. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned toward her. When she didn't move, he closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. It lasted only moments before they both became aware of movement on the porch behind them. They broke apart to find Samuel watching them with wide eyes, the blanket puddle at his feet. "Were you kissing?" he asked bluntly. Bethany felt her face flame, but Zach answered with his usual straightforward manner. "Yes, Samuel, I was kissing your mother. I hope that's all right with you." Samuel considered this seriously. "Does that mean you like her, like my pa liked her?" "I like her very much," Zach confirmed. "And I like you too, very much." A slow smile spread across Samuel's face. "Does that mean you might stay, maybe be my new pa someday, Samuel?" Bethany gasped, mortified, but Zach remained calm, meeting the boy's gaze directly. "That would be up to your mother, Samuel, but I can tell you that I'd like nothing better than to be part of your family someday if you'll have me." Samuel looked from Zach to his mother, his young face alight with hope. "Mama, can he? Please." Caught between embarrassment and unexpected emotion, Bethany struggled to find words. "These things take time, Samuel. Mr. Jackson and I are just beginning to know each other. But you like him." Samuel pressed. "Enough to let him be my pa someday." Bethany looked at Zach, at the patient understanding in his eyes, and found herself unable to deny the truth. "Yes, Samuel, I like him very much. And if in time we both feel that's the right step, then perhaps." It was enough for Samuel, who launched himself off the porch and into Zach's arms with a whoop of joy. I knew it. I prayed and prayed for a new pa, and God sent Mr. Zach. Over the boy's head, Zach's eyes met Bethany's, his expression a mix of surprise, tenderness, and something deeper that made her heart skip. In that moment, surrounded by the golden light of late afternoon, with her son's laughter ringing in her ears, Bethany felt the last of her reservations begin to melt away. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern. Zach rode into town every Saturday, sometimes staying until Sunday afternoon when his duties allowed. Each visit brought new adventures for Samuel, fishing in the creek, tracking rabbits in the foothills, learning to whittle increasingly complex shapes. For Bethany, the visits brought something she had thought lost forever: the quiet joy of connection, of sharing her days and thoughts with someone who truly listened. By December, the town had fully accepted Zach as a regular presence in their lives. Mee beamed approvingly whenever she saw them together, and even Mrs. Hoffman had begun scheduling Bethany's work hours to ensure she was free when Zach visited. "No sense pretending we don't all see where this is heading," the older woman said with uncharacteristic warmth. That cowboy's got intentions written all over his face. On the Saturday before Christmas, Zach arrived with the usual treats for Samuel: peppermint sticks, and a new book of adventure stories, and a small package wrapped in brown paper for Bethany. "It's not much," he said almost shyly as they sat by the fire after Samuel had gone to bed, "but I wanted you to have something special for Christmas." Bethany carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Opening it, she found a tiny photograph of Samuel on one side, the space on the other empty. "I thought perhaps, in time, there might be another picture you'd want to add," Zach explained, his voice husky with emotion. "But for now, I wanted you to have your greatest treasure close to your heart." Tears pricked Bethany's eyes as she fastened the chain around her neck. "It's beautiful, Zach. Thank you." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Bethany, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life." "I know it might seem fast to some, but when you've spent years searching for something without knowing what it was, recognition comes quick when you finally find it." Bethany's heart hammered in her chest as Zach shifted to kneel before her chair, still holding her hand. "I'm not a wealthy man," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can't offer you a life of luxury or ease, but I can promise to love you and Samuel with everything I have, to work hard every day to build a good life for us, to be the husband and father you both deserve." He drew a deep breath. "Bethany Valentine, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The world seemed to still around them, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and their own breathing. Bethany looked into the face of this man who had entered their lives so unexpectedly and transformed them so completely. In his eyes, she saw not just desire or affection, but a steady devotion that promised to weather whatever storms life might bring. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, Zach, I will marry you." His face lit with such joy that she felt her heart might burst. Rising to his feet, he drew her up with him, gathering her into an embrace that felt like coming home. When their lips met, it was a promise sealed, a new beginning consecrated in the warm glow of firelight. They agreed to marry after Christmas, giving them time to make proper arrangements. Mr. Mercer, delighted by the news, offered them the use of the foreman's house on the ranch property, a sturdy 4-room cabin with a view of the mountains. Zach spent the weeks before the wedding adding a second bedroom for Samuel and making repairs to ensure the house was comfortable for his new family. Word spread quickly through the small community. Mee insisted on hosting a gathering for Bethany, where the women of Redemption Creek presented her with quilts, preserves, and practical household items to start her new life. Mrs. Hoffman, to everyone's surprise, gifted her a beautiful white dress that had belonged to her daughter. "She eloped with that drummer from Kansas City," the older woman explained with a sniff. "Never got to wear it. Might as well go to someone who appreciates the value of doing things proper." Samuel, for his part, could scarcely contain his excitement. He followed Zach everywhere when the cowboy was in town, soaking up every bit of knowledge about ranching and riding that his soon-to-be father could impart. "Will I get to help with the cattle?" he asked one evening as they sat around the supper table. "Real cowboys help with cattle, don't they?" "When you're a bit older," Zach promised. "For now, I thought you might like to help with the horses. Mr. Mercer has a new foal due in the spring that'll need gentle handling from the start." Samuel's eyes widened. "My very own horse to help train," Zach corrected with a smile. "Under close supervision. But yes, if you show responsibility, eventually that could be your special project." The boy beamed, then grew serious. "When we're married, should I call you Pa?" Zach glanced at Bethany before answering carefully. "That's entirely up to you, Samuel. You can call me Zach as long as you like, or Mr. Jackson if you prefer more formality. If someday you feel comfortable calling me Pa, I'd be honored. But there's no rush and no expectation." Samuel considered this, his young face thoughtful. "I think I'll try Pa," he decided. "Since that's what you'll be." Something shifted in Zach's expression, a softening, a vulnerability that made Bethany's heart swell with love for both of them. "I'd like that very much," Zach said quietly, "and I promise to do my best to be worthy of the title." The wedding took place on January 2, 1879, in the small church at the center of town. Despite the winter chill, it seemed all of Redemption Creek turned out for the occasion. Mr. Mercer stood as Zach's best man, while Mee, resplendent in her Sunday best, attended Bethany. Samuel, dressed in a new suit that Zach had ordered from Tucson, carried the rings on a small pillow, his face solemn with the responsibility. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, Samuel stepped forward importantly. "I do," he announced in a clear voice. "Me and my Pa in heaven." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the congregation, and Bethany felt tears spring to her eyes at her son's simple eloquence. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. When Zach spoke his vows, his voice carried to the farthest corner of the church, strong and sure in its promises. Bethany's response was softer but equally firm, her hand steady in his as they pledged their lives to one another. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Zach kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Samuel, unable to contain his excitement, threw his arms around both their legs, nearly toppling them in his enthusiasm. Laughing, Zach swept the boy up into his arms. "Well, Mrs. Jackson," he said to Bethany, his green eyes alight with happiness, "shall we take our son home?" The reception at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the number present. As tradition dictated, Zach and Bethany opened the dancing, moving together with a natural harmony that spoke of their growing connection. "Happy," Zach murmured as he guided her around the floor. "More than I thought possible," Bethany replied, her eyes shining up at him. "A few months ago I thought my life held nothing but struggle and loneliness. Now we face whatever comes together," he completed her thought. "The three of us." Later, as they prepared to depart for their new home at the ranch, Samuel suddenly grew quiet. Bethany found him sitting alone in a corner, his earlier excitement dimmed. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, kneeling beside him in her white dress. Samuel looked up, his blue eyes troubled. "Will Pa still love me when you have new babies?" Jimmy at school says when new babies come, parents don't care about the old children anymore. Bethany's heart twisted at her son's worry. Oh, Samuel, that's not true at all. Love doesn't work that way. It doesn't run out or get used up. It grows to include everyone in the family. A shadow fell across them as Zach joined them, having overheard the conversation. He crouched down to Samuel's level, his expression serious. "Samuel, I want you to listen carefully," he said. "When I married your mother today, I wasn't just making promises to her. I was making them to you too. You're not just part of this family, you're the reason it exists. Without you, I might never have stopped to fix Miss Me's fence, might never have met your mother, might never have discovered what I was missing all those lonely years on the trail." Samuel's eyes widened. "Really, really," Zach affirmed. "And if someday we're blessed with more children, they'll be your brothers or sisters, not replacements. They'll look up to you, learn from you, need you to show them the way. That's what being the eldest means. It's a special responsibility and a special honor." The boy's face cleared as he absorbed this. "Like you're the foreman at the ranch, in charge of helping everyone do their job right," Zach smiled. "That's a fine comparison. Yes, very much like that." Samuel considered this, then nodded decisively. "I think I'd like that, being the oldest. Teaching the babies things." "Well then," Zach said, rising and offering his hand to Samuel, "shall we go home and get started on our new life? I hear Mr. Mercer's cook has prepared a special welcome supper for us at the cabin." The ride to the ranch took just over an hour. Samuel nestled between Bethany and Zach in the wagon Mr. Mercer had provided. As they approached the crest of a small hill, Zach reined the horses to a halt. "There it is," he said, gesturing ahead. "Rockingham Ranch. And just there, with the lamp already lit in the window, that's our home." In the gathering twilight, Bethany could make out a sturdy cabin set apart from the main ranch house, its windows glowing with welcoming light. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth against the January chill. Beyond stretched acres of grassland, dotted with cattle and bordered by distant mountains that seemed to cradle the property in their protective embrace. "It's beautiful," she breathed, imagining mornings waking to this view, evenings watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "It's perfect," Samuel declared, bouncing excitedly on the seat. "Can I see the horses tonight? Please," Zach laughed, urging the team forward again. "First things first, Cowboy, let's get your mother settled in her new home. The horses will still be there in the morning." As they drew closer to the cabin, Bethany was touched to see that someone had hung a wreath of pine boughs on the door, a wedding gift to welcome the new mistress of the house. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, and the table was set for three, with a special meal waiting to be served and a bottle of wine, a luxury in these parts, chilling in a bucket of snow. Samuel ran from room to room, exclaiming over every discovery: his new bedroom with a quilt in the pattern of horses galloping across the plains, the kitchen with its proper stove, instead of just a fireplace, the front room with bookshelves already stocked with volumes both practical and entertaining. "Mr. Mercer sent some of his books from the main house," Zach explained. "Said they were gathering dust and would serve better in a home with a growing boy." After they had eaten and Samuel had finally succumbed to sleep in his new bed, exhausted from the day's excitement, Bethany and Zach stood together on the small porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Are you happy with your new home?" Zach asked, his arm around her waist. "I know it's not what you were used to in Philadelphia." "It's perfect," Bethany assured him, leaning into his embrace. "More than I ever dreamed possible after Thomas died. Then I was just trying to survive day to day. Now." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Now I'm looking forward to the future again." Zach's arms tightened around her. "Our future, he whispered against her hair. Together. Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, the weight of the day's emotions finally caught up with Bethany. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude for the second chance at happiness she had never expected to find. Zach, sensing her emotion, drew her closer. "What is it, love?" "I was just thinking about how much can change in such a short time," she replied softly. 3 months ago, I thought Samuel and I would always be alone, that the best I could hope for was to keep him fed and clothed, to somehow give him a decent future despite everything we'd lost. And now—" Bethany smiled through her tears, though he couldn't see it in the darkness. "Now I have a husband who loves my son as his own, a home that feels safe and full of possibility, a future that holds promise instead of just struggle." Zach's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I promise you, Bethany, that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me, to be the husband you deserve and the father Samuel needs." "You already are," she whispered, turning to find his lips with hers. "You already are." The spring and summer of 1879 passed in a blur of activity and adjustment to their new life. Zach's duties as foreman kept him busy from dawn to dusk most days, but he always made time for Samuel's riding lessons and for quiet evenings with Bethany. Samuel thrived in the ranch environment, soaking up knowledge about horses and cattle like a sponge, his natural affinity for animals making him a favorite with the ranch hands. In June, Bethany confirmed what she had begun to suspect: she was expecting a child. The news brought both joy and a renewed bout of anxiety for Samuel, though Zach's patient reassurances seemed to calm his fears. "Remember what we talked about," Zach reminded him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "About being the eldest. This baby's going to need a big brother to show it the ropes, just like I show the new hands how things work around here." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I'll be the best big brother ever," he declared. "I'll teach the baby all about horses and roping and everything." As Bethany's pregnancy progressed, Samuel took his impending big brother duties increasingly seriously. He helped prepare the small room that would serve as the nursery, insisted on accompanying Zach to town to select fabric for the baby's quilts, and solemnly informed every visitor to the ranch about his new responsibility. "I'm going to be a big brother," he would announce importantly. "Pa says that's the most important job on the ranch, even more important than foreman." Zach would wink at Bethany over the boy's head, his eyes crinkling with the smile that still made her heart skip. In these moments, she marveled at how completely he had embraced fatherhood, how naturally he had stepped into the role Samuel so desperately needed. On a crisp February morning in 1880, after a long night of labor with me and the ranch cook's wife attending, Bethany gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Zach, who had paced the porch all night despite the winter chill, came in at me's summons, his face alight with wonder as he beheld his daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny hand, "just like her mother." They named her Grace Elizabeth Jackson, and from the moment Samuel was allowed to see his new sister, it was clear his earlier concerns had been completely forgotten. He approached the bed where Bethany lay with the baby with an expression of awe and protectiveness that brought tears to her eyes. "She's so little," he marveled, peering at the infant's red, wrinkled face. "When can I teach her to ride?" Zach laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Not for a few years yet, Cowboy, but in the meantime there's plenty you can do as her big brother." "Like what?" Samuel asked eagerly. "Well, for starters, you can help your mother when she needs rest, and you can talk to Grace so she learns your voice. Babies need to know they're safe and loved, and a big brother's voice is special that way. Samuel nodded solemnly, clearly taking this responsibility to heart. From that day forward, he was Grace's self-appointed guardian and champion, proudly showing her off to the ranch hands and regaling her with stories and descriptions of everything she was still too young to experience firsthand. As spring came again to the Rockingham, bringing new calves, fresh grass, and wildflowers that dotted the hillsides with color, Bethany often found herself pausing in her daily tasks to absorb the simple beauty of the life they had built. One such evening in late April, as she stood on the porch with baby Grace sleeping against her shoulder, she watched Zach and Samuel returning from the corrals, their heads bent together in conversation, their laughter carrying on the soft breeze. And then what happened? She heard Samuel ask as they drew closer. "Well, then the old bull decided he'd had enough of being fenced in," Zach was saying, his hands gesturing expansively. "He backed up, took a running start, and crashed right through that fence like it was made of paper. Took us 3 days to track him down in the high country." Samuel giggled, his hand trustingly held in Zach's larger one. "Did you get in trouble with Mr. Mercer?" "Sure did," Zach confirmed with a rueful smile. "Learned my lesson about checking fence posts extra carefully after that." They reached the porch steps, both breaking into identical smiles at the sight of Bethany and the baby. The resemblance between them was striking, not in their physical features, for Samuel still had his father's blue eyes and fair coloring, but in their expressions, their mannerisms, the way they moved through the world. "How are my girls?" Zach asked, leaning in to kiss Bethany softly before peering at the sleeping infant. "Has she been good today?" "Perfect," Bethany replied. "How was the fencing?" "All done up to the north pasture," Samuel answered before Zach could, his chest puffing with importance. "I helped hold the wire while Pa hammered the posts. He says I'm getting as strong as any of the hands." "Is that so?" Bethany smiled, reaching out to smooth her son's wind-blown hair. "Then I suppose you've worked up an appetite for supper." "Starving," Samuel confirmed. "Can I wash up and then hold Grace while you finish cooking? I want to tell her about the eagle we saw today." "Of course," Bethany agreed, carefully transferring the sleeping baby to Samuel's waiting arms once he had settled in the rocking chair by the fire. The boy cradled his sister with practiced ease, his expression softening as he looked down at her tiny face. In the kitchen, Zach wrapped his arms around Bethany from behind as she stirred the stew simmering on the stove. "Happy," he murmured against her ear, just as he had on their wedding day. Bethany turned in his embrace, raising her hand to cup his weathered cheek. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. "Thank you for this life, Zach, for being the husband and father we needed." From the other room came the sound of Samuel's voice, soft and animated as he described to his sleeping sister the majesty of an eagle soaring against a blue sky, the freedom of a horse running across an open meadow, the wonder of a world waiting to be explored. "I'm the lucky one," Zach said, his voice rough with emotion as he glanced toward the sound. "That day in town when I stopped to fix me's fence and met a solemn little boy who needed a father. That was the day my life truly began." As the evening light filtered through the windows, painting the simple cabin in hues of gold, Bethany leaned against her husband's solid strength and gave thanks for second chances, for prayers answered in unexpected ways, for the healing power of love to mend what once seemed broken beyond repair. In the years that followed, the Jackson family grew and flourished on the Rockingham Ranch. Samuel became as fine a horseman as his stepfather, eventually taking over the training of the ranch's prized quarter horses. Grace developed her mother's gentle spirit and determination, along with a talent for numbers that made her invaluable in managing the ranch's accounts as she grew older. Two more children joined the family, Matthew in 1882 and Rebecca in 1884, completing their circle. When Michael Mercer passed away in 1890, his will revealed what he had hinted at years earlier, lacking direct heirs interested in ranching. He left the Rockingham to Zachary Jackson, the man who had transformed it from a struggling operation to one of the most respected ranches in the territory. The condition was simple: that the ranch retain its name in honor of the man who had built it, and that it always remain a place where good horses were raised and cattle thrived. On a warm summer evening in 1895, as they celebrated Samuel's 21st birthday with a gathering that included nearly everyone from the ranch and many from Redemption Creek, Bethany found herself once again watching her family from the porch of what was now a much expanded home. Samuel, tall and confident like the man who had raised him, was demonstrating rope tricks to his younger siblings and their friends. Beside him stood Grace, 15 now, and as lovely as her mother had been at that age, laughing at her brother's antics while keeping a watchful eye on 11-year-old Matthew and 9-year-old Rebecca. Zach joined her on the porch, his hair now streaked with silver at the temples but his green eyes as bright and warm as the day they'd met. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Jackson," Bethany smiled, leaning into his familiar embrace. "I was just thinking about how full our lives have become. How rich in all the ways that truly matter." Zach's arm tightened around her waist as they watched Samuel scoop up Rebecca for an impromptu dance, the girls' laughter ringing out across the yard. "I remember the day I first saw him," he said softly. "Standing so brave and serious beside me's fence, trying not to cry when he told me his pa was gone. Something in me just knew I wanted to be the one to make him smile again, to watch him grow into the man he's becoming." "You changed our lives that day," Bethany said, turning to face her husband. "When Samuel cried for a father and you became the answer to his prayers, to both our prayers, though I didn't even know I was making them." Zach's weathered hand gently cupped her cheek, his expression tender. "And you gave me the family I never thought I'd have, a purpose beyond just work and survival." He glanced out at their children, now engaged in some complicated game involving multiple lassos and much hilarity. "I'd say we've been blessed beyond measure, wouldn't you?" As the setting sun gilded the land that had become their legacy, Bethany nodded, her heart full to overflowing. "Beyond measure," she agreed, stretching up to kiss the man who had taught her that love, like the vast Arizona sky, held room enough for both cherished memories and new beginnings. "Beyond measure, indeed."